After months of international investigations into who blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, much speculation remains about the culprit, whether it was Russia, a pro-Ukraine group, the U.S., or another power. According to a New York Times report published Friday, suggests it, quote, may be in no one's interest to reveal more. In its latest report on the sabotage, the Times spoke to a Danish commanding officer who said digging into it could fuel mistrust, adding, quote, there are strategic reasons for not revealing who did it. As long as they don't come out with anything substantial, then we are left in the dark on all this, as it should be.
Journalist Glenn Greenwald zeroed in on this part of the piece, tweeting, quote, the New York Times, after feeding the public several BS versions of who blew up the Nord Stream, an environmentally devastating act of industrial terrorism, now announces it may be in no one's interest to reveal more. He followed up by pointing out the Times piece may offer a clue. And not only that, but U.S. diplomat Victoria Nuland's testimony in a January hearing in the Senate could be one, too. Let's watch that.
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
So you can't say it's in no one's best interest to know. It's to not know. It's in the best interest of the responsible party not to know. So is that a tacit admission that the responsible party is someone, aligned with the Ukrainian side of this? If Western officials, U.S. officials keep saying, we don't want to know more, you can't handle the truth, that suggests there's some blame there, right?
Right. I initially felt that it was unlikely to be the U.S. only because I think President Biden has been struggling with the price of gas. But, I've been talking to people in the industry and they don't think it would have influenced that. So I sort of want to walk back that skepticism a little bit. I think it's really important to point out that Nuland was the one who revealed that the U.S. had, invested $5 billion to bring about a secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine after the Maidan Revolution, right? Which sort of, made it seem like potentially one of our, regime change instances. And she was also, there was a leaked transcript of a phone call she had with the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine in which they were talking about who should and shouldn't be in the next Ukrainian government and talking about who they would be in the, the U.S. best interest to have elected there. So, she's really one of these people who's very much associated with the U.S. attempts to turn Ukraine into a U.S. client state, right? Which is something that Russia has seen as a very aggressive move on our part. And many people feel that this was one of the reasons that Putin felt that, the invasion was necessary. Now, of course, I don't support the invasion, the bloodshed. I don't think that this was justified. But at the same time, for the person who is so heavily identified with U.S. overreach in Ukraine to be coming out and weighing in on this and saying how glad she is, that Nord Stream was destroyed. It really doesn't look good, to say the least.
It reminds me of the Hillary Clinton line about Gaddafi, we came, we saw, he died, that whole thing, where she kind of glibly is happy about that outcome. It was a barbaric, horrible outcome for the leader of Libya that did not then result in Libya becoming a nicer place, right? Then ISIS ran roughshod over the country. There were executions. It was, civil war resulted. It's kind of that. Like, let's be careful about applauding wholesale destruction. Look, I get that, like you, I am totally unsympathetic to Russia and what Russia is doing in the course of this war. But we are not at war with Russia. Congress did not authorize a war against Russia, did not apparently have any knowledge about what happened with Nord Stream. So maybe it didn't happen the way that Seymour Hersh has laid out, and we've interviewed him on the show. I think he makes a compelling case, but we have not seen the documents or had the conversations that he had. Obviously, he can't explain who his sources are, so we can't co-sign it without seeing it. But I think there's a lot of, would have a lot of suspicion about, if not U.S. officials, then Ukrainian officials who have shown that, they can pull off all manner. They pulled off they've blown up bridges. They allegedly, probably pulled off an assassination within Russia itself. That, I think, speaks to them having more capabilities or more capacity than a lot of experts anticipated of them at the beginning. And they're obviously the party in this dispute with the most upside, or the most to gain and the most to lose, since they're in the process of being invaded. They can't afford to play it safe, I would say. So that's kind of where my suspicions are pointing at this juncture. Now, was that with what level of U.S. involvement, understanding, knowledge? Would that action have theoretically happened? I don't know. It could be a high level of coordination or knowledge. It could have been a kind of, hey, we're doing this, maybe, burn after reading kind of scenario. But that's where I would be looking to find out information. And we want to know, we should know, we deserve to know. This whole we'd be better off not knowing, that's the attitude of the deep state, of the national security establishment, people who want to hide from you things that they're ashamed of because they don't think you'll agree with them. They don't think the citizens would authorize it. That's a terrible way to govern, just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, many people want to know what happened there, and we should keep pushing for more information about that. I agree with you. I think the most likely culprit is some, Ukraine entity that got a very heavy assist from an extremely sophisticated intel organization, be it the US, be it the UK. We just don't know yet. We don't know yet. But I agree with you that, who stands to benefit the most from this is clearly Ukraine. The idea that Russia would have done this, I think, is just preposterous. Mm-hmm. But yes,
and nobody
don't tell us that we don't have a right
either.
to know.
Like no one, even the people who don't want to pin blame on the U.S. in the mainstream media, in places like the New York Times, we keep citing their stories. They're not saying it's Russia anymore. They were quick to point the finger at Russia, but nobody's trying to make that case because, as you said, it's not. There's just nothing to it. There's no evidence of it, and it's not something in their interests. So that is, I think that's a really important kind of the narrative changing in real time. It's important to know when that happens and why it happens. Russia did it is no longer the narrative that the media and the people they rely on for sources in the administration, in national security, want you to think. They don't want you to think. They know that's not persuasive. They're not trying to persuade you of that anymore. And that's interesting.
Right. And I will just say shout out to people like Rising and Glenn Greenwald, because, there were times in our very recent history where we were told it's in no one's interest to know this, no one's interest to know that, believe that we have this, believe that we're doing this correctly. And there was just nobody, established enough to, say absolutely not. Like that, no, that's not how it works. The American people have a right to know. And it's, we're living in a golden age of independent media, and it's exciting.
It's just such a patronizing attitude. I mean, it's the attitude of so many, the kind of spy masters, those sorts of people that, we have to guard these secrets because you can't handle them. No. I'll tell you what's good for me to know. It's good for me to be informed. The citizenry gets to decide these policies. We have to be fully informed so that we can vote for political figures who say they are going to implement the policies that we approve of. It betrays a lack of confidence that what they're doing, the deep state type people, is persuasive and is supported. They realize it's not, so they have to keep it cloak and dagger. They have to keep it hidden because they don't want you actually voting on it, because they're worried that they can't persuade you. Because a lot of people on all sides of the political spectrum are sick of the kind of the nation building. What happened in the Middle East. That's something. Again, people in both parties, average people, don't agree. Think those policies were a huge mistake and don't want to repeat them anywhere across the globe. So they're like, well, we're not going to let people vote on it. We're going to keep quiet what we're doing. And that is, again, a terrible threat to democracy, even though those people are the ones always saying they're defending democracy somehow. We will have more Rising right after this.